Hi, everyone. Well, this week we broke through 156,000 subscribers to this Earthfiles YouTube channel, and I thank you all so much for being here. With your help, I would like to make 175,000 by the spring equinox in March. And you guys, subscription is free. So everyone, find that little red and white subscribe rectangle right now in the lower right of your screen. And to subscribe, all you have to do is just click on it and then sign up for notifications of special events and help me keep growing toward a future without raging COVID and with the truth finally cracked open worldwide that we are not alone in this universe. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving here in the United States. But in this awful age of COVID, so many of us can't go home for the holidays. So tonight, I want to share with you some photographs that I hope will make you smile, maybe even laugh. And I'm holding in my arms now the grown-up version in my next photograph. On the left is Chocolate, in the back is Chocolate's wide-eyed brother Fluffy, and in front of Fluffy is their sister, Coco. This photo was taken on October 19th, 2017, 3 years ago, by the highball cat breeder in Pennsylvania that I visited with my daughter Laura, granddaughter Hannah, and my son-in-law John Mead to get these adorable babies. The brothers, Chocolate and Fluffy, came home with me to Albuquerque, while their sister Coco stayed in Philadelphia with Laura and Hannah and John. Then, this summer, Hannah fell in love with another adorable little boy kitten at the highball breeder that Hannah loves to hug and calls him Teddy Bear. Last week, Laura started putting up Christmas tree lights when she saw some brown furry stripes suddenly emerge at the center of the Christmas tree. She grabbed her cell phone and started photographing as the stripe turned into this one little teddy bear eye peeking through the tree branch. He began to move, and Laura pulled back to see precious Teddy Bear rise up more on the Christmas tree branch with a look on his adorable face like, "Is it okay for me to be here?" Laura moved in again with her cell phone for a closer picture, and the tree lights reflected her motion around the perfect, innocent kitten face of Teddy Bear. And then, with one small step for kittenhood, Teddy Bear tentatively extended his left paw forward, as if to gently show us humans, "I know how to climb trees." And we love you, Teddy Bear. And we love Coco and Tata and Chocolate and Fluffy, who's around the corner playing the game because he knows the lights are on. And all the wonderful, fascinating cats everywhere that teach us you don't have to walk on two legs to outsmart humans. Now, I would like to move on to a new Earth mystery. A week ago on November 18th, 2020, biologists and officers from the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources were in a Utah Department of Public Safety helicopter flying over the rugged, rocky land of southern Utah to count bighorn sheep from the air. Pilot Brett Hutchings told a KSL TV reporter in Salt Lake City that one of the biologists yelled out to turn the helicopter around because he saw gleaming metal in the rocks. The crew landed and got out of the helicopter and walked to where a tall rectangle of silver-colored metal rose up almost 12 feet high from the red dirt. Whatever the metal is, it's embedded in the red rocky ground deep enough to support the weight of these two Utah DPS officers when they climbed up one on the other shoulder and they had to lean against the mysterious slab in order to do that, and compared their heights. Now, pilot Brett Hutchings told KSL-TV that he did not know if it might be a construction from NASA to test difficult planetary terrain, or maybe someone's work of art where usually only bighorn sheep can climb. Helicopter pilot Hutchings said, quote, "I would say it's probably between 10 and 12 feet high and made out of metal. We were kind of joking around that if one of us suddenly disappears, then I guess the rest of us makes a run for it," close quote. And he was trying to make a joke about being abducted by aliens. When the Utah DPS Aero Bureau released this Instagram image, they asked the question, quote, "Inquiring minds want to know, what the heck is it?" Close quote. Now, most everyone is reminded of the famous 1968 science fiction film 2001: A Space Odyssey by legendary director Stanley Kubrick. The film centered around a large, perfectly machined, metallic monolith presumed to have been made by unseen extraterrestrial species. Throughout the film, the mysterious monolith shows up periodically in key times and places in the evolution of Homo sapiens sapien, beginning in Africa. The theme is that already evolving primates were manipulated genetically by the unseen ETs to evolve into increasingly intelligent humanoids. Whatever the Utah monolith is, or whoever made it, when it comes to persistent Earth mysteries, a continuing revelation for me are the insights from many of you who have served in military or intelligence work since World War II and reach out, still confidentially, to let me know your firsthand knowledge that other intelligences and their advanced technologies do interact with Earth now and have for centuries. One recent contact, who asked me to call him simply John Smith, is now 74 years old. Back in 1968 to 1969, during the Vietnam War, he was assigned to a U.S. Air Force military installation in Alaska that was constructed only 3 years after the crash of a flying disc made the front page of the Roswell Daily Record on July 8, 1947. The United States Army Air Force was officially separated into two separate military branches on September 18, 1947. And by 1951, construction had begun near Fairbanks, Alaska, that included the creation of this top-secret command post 60 feet underground. The place was called the Headquarters 744th Aircraft Control and Warning Squadron, Murphy Dome Air Force Station, Alaska. Murphy Dome is a 2,930-foot-tall mountain 20 miles northwest of Fairbanks, Alaska, and from 1959 to 1971, the Murphy Dome Air Force Station was a Nike missile defense system in the Fairbanks defense area. Murphy Dome has one remaining facility, a long-range radar station. The purpose is to detect military air threats from afar so that they might be intercepted. During John Smith's work there in 1968 to 69, he had a top-secret clearance in order to drive around generals and other high-ranking people. And that top-secret clearance also led him down a long flight of stairs to a state-of-the-art, computerized command post 60 feet underground.
In August of 1968, every person at the Little Rock Air Force Base got orders for Vietnam. And I mean everyone. So at the time, my wife was 9 months pregnant, and I didn't want to go. So I had a friend in personnel. I asked him to find me an assignment someplace besides Vietnam. He called me up. He says, I found an assignment that you qualify for. So I went up and talked to him. He says, this assignment is a top-secret base or installation in Alaska. And he says, you can get this if you want it. And I said, sure, that'd be great. He says, well, there's a bad side to this. You have to leave in 2 weeks. So I went ahead and took it. I went home for 2 weeks in Taylorville, and then I got shipped out to Alaska.
To Murphy Dome, Alaska, right?
Right.
Which is about 20 miles northwest of Fairbanks.
Right.
And you were there from September of 1968 until 1969?
Right.
And how did it happen that you learned there was a large underground installation at Murphy Dome?
Well, everybody had a roommate, and my roommate worked in the command post, and he told me about some of the stuff that was down there. And one day he asked me if I wanted to go down and see what was going on, and so I told him, sure, I'd go down. You couldn't get to it from above the ground. You had to go outside, and there was a doorway that took you to the stairs that takes you down below. It was a long stairway. It was about 60 feet underground. And there's guards down there to let you in. And I stood above, on top, inside the operations area. I wasn't allowed to go down and look at the computers. And my friend stood up there with me the first time and pointed out what everything was. The main reason we were there in Alaska was to monitor Russia and see what they were doing, because I understand they were only about 250 miles northeast of where we were. And he told me the radar equipment we got here, we can see a pilot in the plane on the runway in Russia and read his name tag and find out what his name is. The equipment we had up there, he said, was that good. That was kind of mind-boggling back in 1968, because they had some really nice computers and monitors, and at that time the public had no idea what a monitor was or a computer or what they did, but there was a lot of stuff up there. Right now, the government is probably still 20 years ahead of what the public knows about.
Right. How many computers were you looking at 60 feet down?
There was about 3 rows of tables. I'm guessing there was probably 24, 25 of them. There was a large screen that had the map of the planet. You could see what was going on in any country on this planet. And then about 20 foot away from that was where the people started sitting. Any airplane or object that was in the air came up on that screen, and you could identify airplanes pretty easy. And you could also identify the UFOs pretty easy, too.
Why did your friends know they were UFOs?
Because evidently the people that were in charge of the command post down there told him what they were.
And did he share with you what they said to him?
No. You can just assume that they're people from some other planet, and they're there monitoring what we're doing.
Did you ever hear from him any explanation for why they would be on that big map at a very sensitive, top-secret location in Alaska, 60 feet underground, and you were allowed to see it?
Well, one reason I was allowed to see it because I had a security clearance. The whole time I was in the service, there was never anything that I was refused to see or do.
Meaning you could walk into any top-secret location anywhere you went?
Absolutely. But I had to have the top-secret clearance because I hauled the generals and the colonels around every place they wanted to go. Plus, occasionally, there would be a plane that flew in that had classified information, and I would have to go down to the control tower down at the landing field. Usually 2 military police would go with me. We'd pick up a briefcase, put it in my vehicle that I was driving, and we'd go to headquarters, and then they would handcuff me to the briefcase and have me carry it into headquarters. And they'd unhandcuff me and take the briefcase, and then I'd just leave.
Okay, describe what you were seeing when you were seeing UFOs, and what was your friend saying to you?
The UFOs that came up on the screen, he pointed out to me which ones were UFOs and which ones were planes, and you could tell them apart real easy because the UFOs were kind of diamond-shaped. They usually traveled in packs of 3 or 6 in a V formation, and you would watch them go across the screen, and then all of a sudden they would just disappear, go off the screen. Same way about coming onto the screen. You wouldn't see anything, and all of a sudden they just pop right up on the screen. They go a little ways, and then just vanish, go off the screen.
Was there any part of this map of the entire world, a flat map, where it appeared to be more populated by the diamond-shaped UFOs coming up?
Yeah. Most of the traffic was south of South America and Africa. That's where the heaviest traffic was.
Why did your friend want you to see this?
Because we were friends.
And what was his work?
He worked at one of the computers that did information down there. I don't know exactly what his job was, but he sat at one of the desks and did computer work. Anytime I wanted to go down, he took me down, escorted me downstairs. I went down there several times.
And how many UFOs at a time did you see?
Oh, it ranged from sometimes 30 to 60 at a time.
Yesterday you said, we never saw them over land. They were mostly over water.
Most of the time. There was a few that you've seen over land, but very few.
Did you talk with your friend about the implication that if these diamond-shaped UFOs were coming up out of water mostly, did that imply they were coming from a base deep under the ocean?
We weren't allowed to talk about it, so we didn't.
Yesterday you said there were, quote, rumors aliens were working in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, that's the first thing he told me. Because when we went down there and he showed me the flying saucers on the screen and kind of poked me and he says, oh, yeah, and by the way, the rumor is that there is aliens working in Washington.
D.C.?
Yep.
And did you say who, what, and why?
No, I didn't ask questions. I wasn't supposed to.
Did he even hint what they looked like?
No, he didn't.
You also said, quote, we had 3 large radar domes, and large UFOs hovered about 30 to 40 feet above them, and each of the UFOs was 100 feet in diameter.
Yeah. Well, there was 3 large radar domes at the time, and my friend told me 2 weeks before you got here, these 2 big discs, about 100 feet, hovered above the domes for 45 minutes. He said everybody was outside watching. We had cameras, but we weren't allowed to take pictures.
Did he tell you what his superior officers were saying about the large UFOs hovering over the radar domes?
No. Everybody was pretty hush-hush about it. We just didn't want to get in trouble and say something we wasn't supposed to.
From information that I have shared with some other researchers over the last decade or so, I am personally convinced that the United States and its allies have known about UFOs for at least 79 years. I think it was 13 weeks after the U.S. entered World War II on December 7th of 1941, at 3:06 a.m. Pacific time on February 25th, in 1942, America's 37th Coast Artillery Brigade fired off 1,430 anti-aircraft shells at a diamond-shaped craft of unknown origin. It was over the Santa Monica Mountains in California, and it was also called around that time either a UFO, and in some documents it refers to them as UFOs, and later UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. Powerful military searchlights were aimed at the big diamond-shaped object, and 2 days later, on February 27, 1942, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, known as FDR, was in top-secret communication in this memorandum for the U.S. Army Chief of Staff George C. Marshall. I want to read the key sentences that explain the origin of U.S. policies of lies and denials about ETs and UFOs since then. And they are red underlined to help follow. Quote, consultation with Dr. Bush, meaning Vannevar Bush from MIT, who would also become an appointee by President Harry S. Truman in the very powerful and very, very secret MJ-12. They were joined by other scientists on the issue of finding practical uses for the atomic secrets learned from study of celestial devices. This precludes any further discussion, and I therefore authorize Dr. Bush to proceed with the project without further delay, and they mean back engineering of what they have found, that is defined as this information is vital to the nation's superiority and must remain within the confines of state secrets. This is the atomic secrets learned, and that further discussion on the matter will be restricted to General Donovan, Dr. Bush, the Secretary of War, and yourself, meaning General George Marshall, Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, and signed FDR. This was 5 years before the famous Roswell UFO crashes in the first week of July 1947. And the atomic secrets learned from celestial devices is FDR's reference to Cape Girardeau, Missouri, where a wedge-shaped UFO was retrieved in April of 1941, along with 3 alien bodies that autopsies showed were identical clones. And if they were clones, where were the clone makers? The government must have been running with nervousness upon that discovery. It was from that Missouri investigation in April 1941 that a, quote, neutronic propulsion device, close quote, was found and is discussed in other later documents by the Majestic 12 group appointed by President Harry Truman to oversee the big secret, other intelligent life forms interacting with our planet Earth became evident during World War II, and political power brokers decided the advanced UFO technologies were to remain state secrets, a policy that has evolved to this day. And John Smith, tonight, finally, at age 74, decided that he would tell me what he has kept secret since 1968 to 69. And even though he was not privy to all of the big secrets around all of the knowledge of who already knew, how had they already been able to create a big screen that UFOs would automatically pop on through some other technology someplace else. I hope there are others in the audience tonight and in future Earthfiles YouTube channel broadcasts who might also have more firsthand information from military or government service about the unidentified aerial phenomena, UFOs that have been in the modern world for 70 years, but have been in this Earth planet's history for at least 270 million years, according to a DIA analyst who talked to me in December 1999. And if there are some tonight or in the next few weeks, you can contact me by my email, which is always earthfiles@earthfiles.com, like a preliminary handshake. I also use Proton Mail. I use regular hard U.S. mail, and sometimes Federal Express. And I think that if more people could come forward, like John Smith and others who I have been sharing on this channel for the last 3 or 4 years, that at least we in the civilian population of the Earth and all of the countries that are beginning to join in the audience, that at least we are breaking news for each other, waiting for that big headline that will go around the world, that we're not alone in this universe, and that it's way past time that we humans were introduced to at least some of the intelligences that our government thinks are allies and friendly. And on that note, on this Thanksgiving Eve, when so many of us are still bound in houses and apartments and cannot see our loved ones, I would like to have Brad replay my Thanksgiving card to all of you tonight that I used at the beginning of this broadcast. On the left is Chocolate, in the back is Chocolate's wide-eyed brother Fluffy, and in front of Fluffy is their sister, Coco. This photo was taken on October 19th, 2017, 3 years ago, by the highball cat breeder in Pennsylvania that I visited with my daughter Laura, granddaughter Hannah, and my son-in-law John Mead to get these adorable babies. The brothers, Chocolate and Fluffy, came home with me to Albuquerque, while their sister Coco stayed in Philadelphia with Laura and Hannah and John. Then, this summer, Hannah fell in love with another adorable little boy kitten at the highball breeder that Hannah loves to hug and calls him Teddy Bear. Last week, Laura started putting up Christmas tree lights when she saw some brown furry stripes suddenly emerge at the center of the Christmas tree. She grabbed her cell phone and started photographing as the stripe turned into this one little teddy bear eye peeking through the tree branch. He began to move, and Laura pulled back to see precious teddy bear rise up more on the Christmas tree branch with a look on his adorable face like, "Is it okay for me to be here?" Laura moved in again with her cell phone for a closer picture, and the tree lights reflected her motion around the perfect, innocent kitten face of Teddy Bear. And then, with one small step for kittenhood, Teddy Bear tentatively extended his left paw forward, as if to gently show us humans, "I know how to climb trees." So love from the cats, love to the cats, and I hope that all of you are going to have a wonderful closeness wherever you are in the United States tomorrow for Thanksgiving, knowing that some people have traveled and a lot haven't. And I hope that it made you smile and that you enjoyed my Thanksgiving card from our kitties to all of you. And now, dear Peggy, I'm very curious about the comments and questions tonight on this Thanksgiving Eve.
Hi, Linda. First, I'd like to thank everybody for their super chats tonight. So thank you, Minnesota Folk, Jeffrey Rizzo, Melissa, Kendall 190, Doreen Garby, Moonbird, Gina McHugh, Miss Pac-Man, Leon Brown, Tina Mobley, Drago Orion, Jan Marie III, Caroline Boyce, Rebecca Cole, David Goodridge, and Wayne Slater. Thank you, everyone.
Gosh, thank you, thank you, thank you. I really do hope that one day after we've all gotten COVID vaccines in our arms, that we could do some kind of a gathering of Earthfiles YouTube channel audiences in like a building where we could all maybe finally, I don't know if we'll be able to hug, but at least greet ourselves and talk. Then that's another thing to look forward to maybe in 2021 or 2022. So thank you, everybody. It takes a village to do all of this, so I can't thank you enough. And now, Peggy, what about questions and comments about what we've shared tonight from John Smith?
We have another question that I believe that Barry Robinson had asked at the beginning of the chat, so I'm going to ask this question. He wants to know, what do you think about the ancient civilization that was on the moon, on Mars, and could they have been destroyed by some sort of bombs?
I've known John Brandenburg for years and years, going all the way back to the very first Viking image of the face on Mars and all of the work that I did with Dr. Mark Carlotto, who did a brilliant book having to do with his investigations. Mark Carlotto is a PhD and worked at the Analytical Sciences Corporation outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And he did very, very good analysis work on the face on Mars, the NASA photo. And he was in collaboration with Molinar and Di Pietro and those guys that were in the first wave of investigating a real, I think there were two that were at least detailed images of what it became known as the face on Mars, that NASA tried hard to dismiss by putting out press releases saying that it was, quote, only a trick of light and shadow, close quote. Well then, later John Brandenburg, PhD, UC Berkeley, who took a deep interest in some of the work that he had read from that first wave of those scientists who had taken the original Viking images and had done an analysis and had concluded that there was a large pyramid, that there were other structures in the vicinity of the pyramid, some known as the fort, a series of things. And then in a distance from what they called the pyramid and the city is the 1.5 mile long carved face, head of what has been known as the face on Mars. And when John Brandenburg began doing studies, he wanted to know what Viking reported to NASA on the atmospheric constituents in Mars. And when he was at UC Berkeley, he had gone into a library, which only the people who were working on certain PhD studies could go to. It wasn't a library accessible to the public. And he was standing in line and recognized a senior scientist who came in and was standing behind him to use the Xerox machine. And John had figures on Xenon 129, which is the product of an atomic bomb. And he had the level of Xenon 129 in Earth's atmosphere after August of 1945, when we dropped 2 atomic bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and in July had been the big test down at White Sands. So there had been 3 atomic bombs exploded on the Earth between July and August of 1945. So John Brandenburg, in that library line to use a Xerox machine, says to the man that he recognizes as an important scientist, he said, take a look at these numbers, and said, this is Xenon 129 in the Earth after the bombs in July 1945, and here is the xenon level that Viking picked up on Mars. And John said it was 2.5 times higher than what was on the Earth in 1945, on Mars. And that the scientists just said to him, well, like nothing new, yeah, we know. There was a hydrogen bomb explosion in the northern hemisphere of Mars. End of discussion. No other discussion. In fact, I think the scientists walked away. That is what led to John Brandenburg's book that came out 5 years ago, I believe in 2015, called Death on Mars, written as a PhD nuclear physicist about what he discovered and his hypothesis that when we actually start getting truth, let's hope that that is the case and that it doesn't continue into policies of denial for the next centuries, that if we get to Mars, whether it's Elon Musk or somebody else, and that there's actual archaeology done in the Cydonia region, that it will be discovered that there was some kind of an atomic explosion or hydrogen explosion, and that it compressed what was there at that Cydonia region. And as he writes in his book, it will be an archaeological excavation to find evidence of a civilization that was living on Mars. He thinks it was at least 1 million years ago, and they were killed by someone or something for reasons unknown. Death on Mars. Now, I've told you in summary what I have talked with John Brandenburg about in hours of discussion. And he says that it's his understanding that the government of the United States and others have felt that they could never tell the Earth the truth. Well, it's like all of the policies of denial since World War II. We can't tell the world about the discs that ran rings around jets during World War II because the stock market will crash, religions will crumble, and humans will be devastated. I don't think any of that would happen. I think in the 21st century that humans are demonstrating that they have a lot of strength. Look at what we're all going through now for nearly a full year with COVID. And it's been tragic. But people are putting up with what seems like unbearable stress. The nurses, the doctors, everybody. And they're still going to work every day. Humans are, I think, much stronger than governments have given them credit. If we knew for a fact video from whatever remote machines that we would have going with maybe the Elon Musk investigation of starting to get people into Mars, and that we would send rovers to go into Cydonia and show what is there for real, I think that it could be a real positive. Governments could use this. Governments could use Mars and what is really there, to start introducing that we've never been alone in the universe. We are babies in this universe. There are ancient intelligences that have even fought with each other for reasons unknown. So that's what is like a prologue about what probably happened on Mars in the northern hemisphere of Cydonia, maybe 1 million years ago. And if you want to read a fascinating book, read Death on Mars by John Brandenburg, PhD, nuclear physicist. Footnote, I believe it was in the fall of, I'm pretty sure it was September of 2019. John Brandenburg spoke at a major conference hosted by NASA in California in the fall of 2019. NASA invited John Brandenburg to talk about the content in his book, Death on Mars, which is about everything I've just summarized in a short way. So if NASA is inviting John Brandenburg and they want that content to be presented at a conference, it seems to me, as John said, it's like they want the ice broken. They're not prepared to tell the whole truth on television, but they want the ice broken with scientists. And John ended up having scientists come and talk to him at that NASA conference about other research, other data that would support what John writes about in Death on Mars. So if the ice is breaking with scientists and NASA to start trying to at least get these ideas out, this solar system didn't start 5,000 years ago with Egypt or Samaria or Greece. This solar system has been here for a very long time. This planet Earth that we're on is supposed to be 4.6 or 4.8 billion years old. That Defense Intelligence Agency analyst who met with me for 7 hours in December of 1999, he's the one who said, we know that there have been 3 extraterrestrial civilizations in conflict with each other who have been manipulating genetic experiments on this planet, which they consider to be a laboratory, Earth. And they have been mixing and matching genes, harvesting genetic material, and terraforming this planet for things like gold for at least 270 million years, and that our government has proof of that. Well, I do the work I do, hoping that the government will finally start telling the truth, and that at the first huge announcement will certainly make 3-inch headlines around this planet. We're not alone in this universe. And what they start to unfold behind that, just remember what I have tried to share with you from other scientists and medical people and physicists here in my Earthfiles work, on the broadcast, in my Earthfiles news, the 3,000 in-depth reports there, my books, my documentaries. I think I've done at least 1,000 radio broadcasts since 1979. And it's all been about pushing forward. That the truth is that humanity, the current model, Homo sapiens sapien, is just the latest humanoid intelligence on planet Earth. Certainly not the only one, and not the only one that has existed in this solar system, and that out in the Milky Way galaxy and the Andromeda galaxy and the trillion galaxies in this universe. Other life, other consciousness. It's been there a long time. It's there now. and the excitement about the future that we could all share if governments would just start telling the truth is that there is so much more for us all to learn about ourselves and the universe that we are in, because physicists all the time are now putting papers out about all kinds of new discoveries that seem to be also opening up another truth, that we could be in a holographic universe. And once we get there, who is projecting the universe that we're all in? I find it exciting, not anything to collapse over, and it never dents for me my link to the divine field. The divine field is the field that is responsible for how many universes there are in whatever projection or situation they are in. It's all sourced. The progenitor source is the divine field. Okay, Peggy.
A viewer has a question about John Smith, and they were wondering, did he have to sign a non-disclosure agreement? How was he able to speak to you about his experiences now?
I don't believe that he ever was asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which I find in many of the people I talk to. It makes no sense. It's not logical. Remember Brian S. in Antarctica, and they're dealing with the disappearing scientists and all the rumors that the scientists met with actual ETs in a big base underground near the South Pole, and that they had men in black twice come to his C-130 group and say, "You are not to talk about anything that you have seen." And never ask for them to sign a non-disclosure agreement. He's always been puzzled by that. He talked to me completely without any qualifications or qualms, because he and his crew never signed non-disclosure. So as far as I understand, John Smith was not asked to sign a non-disclosure, but he did have a top secret security clearance so that he could go as part of the motor pool. He was the only one who had a top secret security clearance, so that he could drive the generals and the high-ranking officers who came into Murphy Dome, and or maybe something that happened in Fairbanks and it was only 20 miles away, and he would drive in there to do some sort of work to help people who flew in for whatever were the top secret meetings. He could drive them. So it may be that if people are asked to sign non-disclosure agreements, it heightens and enhances the important secrecy of what they're doing. If they don't have a lot of knowledge about ETs and UFOs, then maybe it is better from the Pentagon's point of view, the Department of Defense, don't ask them to sign a non-disclosure agreement, just tell them don't talk. And he may, I think, fall in that category. And it was his friend who had a lot more information about the UFOs, but did compartmentalize in his discussions with John Smith. So for 79 years at least, since 1941, Cape Girardeau, Missouri, there has been all of this compartmentalization and a whole series of, some people are threatened, their lives are threatened, their families are threatened, you talk, all of your money, it will be taken from your banks, you will be really hard threats to maybe signing a non-disclosure agreement or not signing anything. And John Smith is in that category, but he shared with me what he heard from his top secret clearance buddy who did know more about the UFOs that came in and out of that Murphy Dome base. And that one was really dramatic. Imagine that you're working in a really highly classified base, and suddenly 100-foot disc and 100-foot disc come down over those big radar domes and just hover there, stock still, silent, 45 minutes. Well, apparently nobody shot at them. Nothing of a violent nature took place. That was, to me, one of the more positive insights from John Smith's story, is that he heard in great detail about those 100-foot UFOs, but nobody responded. There was no airplanes shooting at them or shooting from the ground or whatever artillery that they might have had. And I've heard other stories like that, where Bob Salas, who wrote the important book about all of the UFO intrusions at the Minuteman bases, he was stationed 80 feet underground in one of the missile silos. There were dozens and dozens of sightings and high strangeness that took place in our Minuteman, the silos and the ground above and security. And there were warnings, but a lot of those people didn't have to sign documents either. And that's where we have learned that the UFOs were extremely interested, apparently, in making sure that they could demonstrate, we will shut your missiles down if you launch. And that's the impression that I've had from Bob Salas and others, that was the communication. We will shut your missiles down if you launch, like in a war. And maybe you could argue that if Mars was the scene of a war at Cydonia 1,000,000 years ago, that those ETs or ones that know how splitting the atom or a hydrogen bomb or all of that can ruin a planet forever, and they do not want that to happen to laboratory Earth. And so, no matter what happened on Mars, hopefully we have watchers, monitors, whether they are artificial intelligence or organic intelligence or a mixture of both, that continually watch this planet, because ironically, it may be that the planet laboratory is far more important to some of these non-human civilizations than keeping us alive. Remember when I told you a week or two ago about being in that crop formation in England and being at the edge and having that thought voice say, life on this earth is not guaranteed. And that always seems to come in as a theme when you are investigating UFOs and you talk with people in the abduction syndrome. They have the same sense that there are watchers and monitors, and that if humanity goes too far with things like atomic bombs, we would be stopped in our tracks, which is a good thing from my point of view, not a bad thing. What I keep praying for is that my fellow humans will learn to not want to go to war, not fight. So let's see. What about one more?
Do you think that any recent human historic events were shaped by Ebens?
By Ebens specifically, An EBIN, by government definition, is an extraterrestrial biological entity that is known to the public as the gray category. And the extraterrestrial biological entities are a specific type of gray, as I understand it. That their heads are shaped like a pear and not like the ones that come down to a pointed chin. That the EBIN's eyes are rounder, less shaped like almonds, less pointy, less wraparound, more front face, large, chocolate brown sometimes. That they can wear what we would consider to be long-sleeved robes, as opposed to the leotards that are described in the pointed chin grays. And that the EBINs, all the way back to the crashes in Roswell, were some of the beings that we first interfaced with. And that I know a story in considerable detail from not 47, but 49, another crash in Roswell that was never publicized. And in that crash, we were trying to learn more and more what to do with, are they really crashes, or are they like Trojan horses putting certain technology safely in the hands of humans to back engineer? That was one of the hypotheses after 47 by 49. And that different teams were then organized to go to crash sites because the whole goal was technology. Well, in this particular case, it was an Air Force captain. There were several men. They were now becoming a well-oiled machine because there had been several of these crashes. And each man had a very specific part that they were to investigate, monitor, photograph. And the Air Force captain was behind. Other humans had gone ahead. So the Air Force captain is coming up behind them toward the crash site. And all of a sudden, his mind was filled with what seemed to be images of something like explosions. And he didn't know where it was coming from for a moment. And looking at the ground, it looked as if there was only wreckage. And then he said it was like something took his face, took his head, like we would imagine hands, and started pulling. He's not seeing hands, he's not seeing a being, he's feeling pulled physically and mentally. And as he's feeling, and he follows where he's being pulled, and he seems to be approaching just wreckage. And then he hears like a cry in his mind, startled him terribly. And then he feels pain. He's feeling empathic pain, and he still cannot see where is it coming from. And he moves closer and closer to the wreckage, and the sound and the pain in his mind got stronger. And then it was, as he said, like his eyes, like his very sight was drawn down, and it was a space in the wreckage. And he had to get down to the space in the wreckage. And there, glittering, were the eyes of a being. And he called, and the crew that came to lift up the wreckage, and they lifted up the being. And whoever was the person in command at this particular retrieval said to him, "You are going with this being. You are going to be on assignment at Los Alamos National Lab. You are to stay with this being, and you are to translate for us from now on." And this is the being, the Eben, that died of unknown causes on June 18th, 1952. So it was alive for 3 years. And it's my understanding that the Eben, with the Air Force captain who, for reasons unknown, had the ability to take down the telepathic downloads from that being very clearly, and did so on a daily basis with 16 millimeter film, where the Air Force captain human sat next to the extraterrestrial biological entity, Eben, would take the telepathic download from questions, talk to the camera, what the being was putting in the Air Force captain's head, and that they did this daily, a tremendous, huge download of information until the being died, and they don't know why. And that one of the, when I was able to ask questions to this Air Force captain who died of prostate cancer, I was able to ask questions before he died. He said that one of the dialogues that stuck with him the most was hearing from the Eben, "We made you. We put you here. But you have to live it." And the Air Force captain said that that same Eben also, in answer to a question, is reincarnation real? That the being telepathed to the Air Force captain who said on the film that exists in an archive somewhere, reincarnation, the recycling of souls, is the machinery of this universe. How much profound knowledge is waiting for you and for me and for humanity to learn from Ebens and other intelligences in this universe who can communicate telepathically, who have communicated telepathically. And what has come to me and what has come to others from that telepathic communication makes me want to sit down with an Eben, hoping I could receive telepathy and ask every question I have about the universe and the divine field, and to learn what another consciousness who may be much, much older than we are would say in answer. I find that exciting. I don't find that threatening to the status quo. We need to break all of this open so that all humanity can know the good, the bad, the neutral, and that Eben, in communication with that Air Force captain at Los Alamos, exists on 16 millimeter film that has to have been transferred to videotape and to DVDs and probably Cray computers. It's there. It just needs to be shared with us as the current surface species of Earth, for us to know that we have a lot to learn, we have a lot to grow, and we could do it better if all humanity shared in it. And then we had their help, Eben help. Not in fear, but in help. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody, everywhere, every country, all of us. We need Thanksgiving for each other, Thanksgiving for the vaccines that are coming for the horrible COVID, thanksgiving for in anticipation that in another year, maybe everybody is going to be able to go home for the holidays. I love you. I'll see you next week.
Turn on closed captions for YouTube videos by clicking the white CC button on the lower right. The default language for Linda's videos is English. If you would like to see the captions in another language, click on the white settings button next to the CC button. Select Subtitles CC, and then select Auto Translate. Select a language, and the captions will now appear in that language.
Sort of gone through, and they will hold their heads. I never had a cat do that before. And they'll pull against the comb, helping me get out snarls. And I think it's the best they've ever been.